For 16 years, Joseph Layton, played by Anthony Knight, has lived his life as the spiritual figurehead of a cult named the Canon, taking in lost souls whose lives haven't gone to plan and shepherding them into having some kind of purpose. However, the Canon is all a scam, which Layton has been using to slowly drain contributions from his now wide-reaching congregation for his own means. And on the eve of a planned mass suicide for the followers, he prepares to abandon them and move on to a new life. What he hasn't accounted for, however, is that two of his most devoted lieutenants in the cult, Hannah and Marshall, who, having noticed that their leader has seemingly strayed from the path, see it as a test of faith on the eve of their ascension and set about realigning Joseph before the spiritual ascension the next morning. Thus begins a night of challenges as Joseph tries to convince the pair that all of what is happening has been planned, whilst being careful to not give away his true intentions, and all the while being presented with his own teachings from those he manipulated with those very words. Directed by Adam Nelson of Apple Park Films, The Mire is a low-budget, mostly single-location, three-way play thriller, which makes the most of the micro-budget to deliver a film that sits comfortably alongside much higher-end productions. The small cast and the marvellously chosen location to represent the church work wonderfully to bring you into the fold, much like a member of the cult yourself as the narrative progresses. Feeling very much like a stage production, but for all the right reasons. There's nothing stagey about this. The intensity grows pretty early on as the trio clash and argue teachings back and forth. All the while, Knight as Joseph shows visible cracks as he starts to break under the spell of lies that he created. The dialogue exchanges feel very real, with no showboating going on here, and this grounds the concept of the Mire in a very concerning reality. Flashbacks to Hannah and Marshall being recruited and their early moments within the canon highlight how easy it was for Joseph to manipulate broken people in this broken world. And many of the things that he says to bring them into the fold are the things that we all want to hear and we can all relate to. Chris Watts' screenplay feels very grounded. It relies heavily on dialogue exchanges, but it never feels like the dialogue is too heavy. It's a careful balance to make it accessible, whilst also slowly building to a solid and dark climax. In a world in which we all feel that we need to find someone who will listen and a community that we can feel safe in, films like The Mire offer a warning sign to watch out for the wolves amongst us who will take advantage of the lost sheep. With wonderful direction, a trio of leads that keeps the intensity growing, and a score that keeps up a pervading sense of unease, The Mire shows that sometimes a smaller budget can be utilised well to deliver something fresh, engaging and thought-provoking, and is certainly a film that is worth checking out. A group of teens finds a locket under a collapsed watchtower in the woods, and one of them removes it to give to his girlfriend. However, upon removing it, they unwittingly resurrect the corpse of Johnny, a vengeful spirit who sets about seeking the lost locket, brutally killing anyone in his way. With a plot that involves woods and lakes, teens on vacation, and locals in ramshackle homes, with an undead killer dispatching all he meets in creative ways whilst mostly wearing a mask, you'd be forgiven for thinking that I'd accidentally stumbled on another Friday the 13th sequel. And yes, this lifts heavily from such films and similar films within the slasher genre, offering nothing plot-wise that we haven't come to expect, and every trope is being played right down to the final girl. From that perspective, this could simply be taken as derivative trash. But what makes this film stand out amongst its peers is the approach in which it takes. You see, for the majority of the film, we're following the killer, with a tight 1.33 to 1 box aspect ratio being used, and a third-person camera approach following from behind Johnny as he stomps his way through the forest. The film offers a whole different approach to the overused cliches of the slasher horror. In addition, the choice to not have a music score underlying the events is wonderfully unnerving. Without rising cues to tell us what we should be getting scared by, instead we get the ambient sounds of the forest and lake before we hear voices in the distance, and the killer changes direction to hone in on the sounds before striking, along the way, selecting various tools that he could use to maim with. This serves well to allow the moments themselves to create the unnerving terror, rather than an orchestra telling you that you should be worried. The following the killer approach allows the film to shine a spotlight on moments often seen within the genre where the killer seems to appear out of nowhere. And there's one scene in particular around a cabin that covers the distracting noise, nobody's there, someone glimpsed through a window, strike sequences that is so perfectly done, showing that these undead killers aren't necessarily as stupid as we tend to think they are. Gore fans will have a lot to relish here with the variety of kills on offer, but to some degree, I felt that a few of these diminished the film, making the smart concept a little too exploitative. I've never been a fan of overuse of gore, and here I feel much the same. Yes, it's creative and kind of effective, but it also, for me, kind of breaks the rising tension whenever it happens because it just becomes an effect showcase. The final act flips it to follow a final girl and does somewhat diminish the overall approach, ending a little flat as a result. But overall, I felt this was a smart new approach to a very tired formula that served its purpose well. It's akin to watching a gamer stream of the Friday the 13th video game. In a Violent Nature is definitely worth a watch for any fans of the slasher genre.